Welcome to the Cleaning Up Business Podcast. My name's Chris Guilfoyle and I'm going to be your host. In every episode, we're hoping to bring you industry leaders from a wide variety of service sectors, disruptors within their industry, and day-to-day entrepreneurs with some business and life lessons for you guys to take away. Let's jump in to today's episode.
But it was time to take that leap. And I did. And it's been one of the best decisions I've ever made.
Is there a particular low point within your career you can recall?
Yeah, a couple. And the security van turning up at the door and a bag of cash coming in. Within about 3 months, I was thinking, I've made a mistake here. And initially said, no, we told you before. Oh, did you? Well, think again, because we're not accepting that. When you wake up in the morning and don't want to go to your work, it's time to change. And actually just saying, excuse me, you need to listen.
That's such a fantastic point. It just makes perfect sense. I couldn't see how anyone could argue against that.
They can't. They just ignore it. There's no reason other than, do you want to do it?
Welcome back to another episode of the Cleaning Up in Business podcast, where we get industry leaders and experts within the cleaning industry to come on and talk things all cleaning related and business related, in a hope you guys take some key lessons away from our discussions. Today, I am fortunate enough to be in Hatfield with Jim Melvin, the Chief Executive of the Exclusive Services Group. Jim has had an illustrious career in the cleaning industry and is currently the Chairman of the British Cleaning Council and also Master of the Worshipful Company of Environmental Cleaners. Jim, thank you for joining me on the podcast
Pleasure,
today.
Chris. Good morning.
So we've met previously a long time ago, early career, and I've been watching you progress and the stuff that you've done, and it's fantastic to see. And I just want to say from the off, thank you for the stuff you're doing at the moment.
Thank you.
With the British Cleaning Council trying to get the industry recognised. It's definitely overdue, and it's great to see someone actually taking it by the scruff of the neck and moving forward with that. So with all of our guests, you've been in the cleaning industry for some time now. We go all the way back to the start. So tell us a little bit about yourself and your journey before the cleaning industry and how you fell into the industry like most people do.
Yeah, okay. So I moved south and from Glasgow and was involved in football. So that was playing and then ultimately coaching. And I became a coach because I was a dreadful player. And they say that those that play and those that coach. So I did okay in coaching. And ended up coaching at Wycombe Wanderers, and for a number of years with the manager, a couple of managers there, but Martin O'Neill being the most predominant. And we were at that time in what was the Vauxhall Conference, now the National League, and we were part-time. So I'd come out the full-time game and I had to find a job. And at the time I was around the Marlow area, and I was playing football with a guy called Phil Poulter, whose dad was Mike Poulter, who was then a master of the Worshipful Company.
Okay.
And Mike had a company, and he was looking for an area manager.
All right.
And that was how I came into the industry, and I thought, yeah, I can do this, And he gave me an opportunity, thankfully. And through that, I ended up meeting at walk rounds. I meeting a guy that you may remember called David Stewart.
Yes.
Who David was at OCS. David and I got on really, really well, and he invited me to join OCS down at Odium.
Okay.
And I was there for about 3 years, grew to what was called an area director at the time, and that was great. But at the same time, the football was going well. Wycombe won promotion to the Football League, and Martin invited all the staff to go full-time. And I left to go back into full-time football.
Okay.
And was there for 5-6 years with Martin. Also did a little bit with him at Leicester. And it was fantastic because I never thought for 1 minute that I'd ever find myself at Wembley with the team, albeit coaching 3 times, and we never lost. So that was great, but I also had a family. And as the years went on, sort of 95, let me put it the way it was put to me, that on the gates at Adams Park it said Wycombe Wanderers. I thought it said Barcelona, right? And I began to realise that I needed to do other things for family. And I don't know if you remember a gentleman who sadly passed away a few years ago, but he was the Director General of the CSSA, Martin Vesey.
Yep.
And Martin and I had been friends. And I'd stayed in contact with a lot of people. There's some fantastic people in this industry.
Definitely.
And Martin contacted me to say, look, there's a role coming up. It was at Barkland. Were you interested? And I decided at that point, John Gregory was then the manager at Wickham. My contract was up. I'd been offered a new one, but it was time to take that leap. And I did. And there's huge things, obviously, you miss about, because the football thing was heart.
Yeah, I distinctly remember football in some conversations being clearly your passion.
Absolutely. Still is. I'm still season ticket holder at Celtic. So that was where it was. And I came into the industry and worked with some great people at Barkland, Ken Atherton and Martin Cox and Martin Veazey. And that went on. I had an opportunity to go to LI, which maybe wasn't one of my better choices.
Okay.
Didn't get on with the CEO there very well. And long story short, ended up being MD of Strand.
Which is where I met you, I remember distinctly.
And it was effectively going back to OCS, where I knew some wonderful people, both in the family. I'd done my training, for instance, with Chris Cracknell, so I knew Chris very, very well.
Fantastic speaker. I've seen him speak a few times.
A nice man. Yeah. A genuinely nice man. Paul Thrupp,
Great guy. Huge influence on my career, personally.
Wonderful guy. And very, very influential in the industry. And I learned lots of things from people throughout that whole journey. But you also learn things that you wouldn't do.
Sure.
And there were some people at OCS at the time that perhaps I learned what not to do. But they were more little people.
Yeah, of course.
In terms of what they thought they were.
Yeah.
But the reality was it was a great time. And then part of my career had been with Broadreach, and that was run and owned and founded by David Evans.
Right.
Now, David was a Conservative MP in the Thatcher government. He was also chairman of Luton Town. And I had known David and subsequently his family. And they'd sold Broadreach, but they'd started Exclusive.
Right.
Or David did. And I had a phone call from Gary, who's David's son. David sadly died in 2008. And he wanted somebody to come in. That was in 2012.
Right.
And I took the opportunity. And it's been one of the best decisions I've ever made.
Yeah.
Because I know the family.
Sure.
There's an infinite amount of trust. Hopefully both ways, but there is an infinite amount of trust. And we've done okay.
Yeah.
We've done okay. In the meantime, I fed the football fix by coaching at non-league level. Yeah. With Windsor and Marlow and various other clubs. And we did okay. We won a few things. But maybe 3 or 4, well, maybe longer than that, a few years ago, I decided that I too much on. And the truth of the matter is, as I said to you earlier, it's a young man's game.
Yeah. Interestingly, sport, quickly cover that, because I find there's a great fascination in a crossover between the two. Do you find your managerial career and sporting career, there's a crossover into how you work at Exclusive?
Absolutely. Yeah. Maybe not the language used.
Yeah, of course.
But
not that sideline.
Yeah, this sort of dressing room. Wow, I've been on the end of a few. But there is a huge thing, because ultimately it's about recognising people's talents. It's about putting a team together. Mm-hmm. And teams have been huge in my life. Yeah. And I've been very fortunate. I've worked with some great people. And today in Exclusive, I'm surrounded by some excellent people. And that makes you a lucky man. And there's nothing wrong with that. But the reality is you take lots of aspects of a dressing room where it is one aim, win the game. Yep. And it's exactly the same, whether that's a tender submission or whether it's getting the contract right or making people actually realise their accountability within that team, or perhaps the whole thing about morale and pushing people on. There's absolutely huge synergies with it. As I say, the only thing that's maybe significantly different is maybe the language used, or most of the time. Yeah, of course. Unless it's called for. Sometimes it's needed. When you've had a football career, and then what was your perception of the cleaning industry when you were first asked to come in it? Because obviously we know from some of the work you're doing and what I've seen in my time in the career, first impressions of the cleaning industry can be, and you discussed it today on the radio as we were coming up here, people's perceptions of the industry can be negative for many different reasons, usually wrongly as well. So when you've done that transition and someone offered you a role in the cleaning industry, what was your initial thoughts, Jim? It's a really good question, because when I joined, I went around a few sites and I was being really taught from the bottom up. Yep.
Best way.
Absolutely, and getting out at sort of 5 and 6 in the morning.
Not so best, but yeah.
And truthfully, I thought, this is wildly unprofessional.
Oh, really?
I did, honestly, if I'm being honest.
Yeah.
Because it was to some extent the whole Mr. and Mrs. Mop thing.
Yep.
In those days, it was still being paid cash.
Okay.
So, and I remember thinking, if I'm brutally honest, thinking, I think I can do okay here.
Yeah.
Because of course I had come out of a different world.
Of course.
And it was completely alien to me. But what I've seen over that significant period of time is you could not compare the industry today to what it was then.
Okay.
And I suppose you could say that for a whole raft of different
of
industries, but you couldn't compare it. And the industry today, the transparency, the approach, the technology, the science, innovations are hugely different.
Okay.
If you'd said to me back then, and what was that? When I come back into it, it was 95, I suppose, when I come back out of football again, and even looked at it now today, no, it's a massively different and for the better industry.
Can you give us a couple of examples of where you'd say it would change? Obviously, innovation's moved on a lot since then, but is there any working practices or just general practices?
Even simple things, I just touched on it. I can remember week one and the Securicor van turning up at the door and a bag of cash coming in with a whole load of waste slips and being told, there's your wages.
Split that up.
You bag them up.
Yeah.
And now I look, and probably a lot of companies, all our staff are on a TNA system, which is geofenced, so that we know if there's lone workers, all of those sort of things. And there's no argument. Yeah, that's when you clocked in. That's when you clocked it. You were on that site. It's shown on the geofencing system, and we know exactly what's going on. Yeah. So that's hugely different. In terms of practices, yes, there was practices and processes in place. Were they monitored? Were they really looked after? Probably not. Yeah. Probably not to the extent that they are now. And there was a lot in terms of training that people talked about, but didn't always deliver. Okay. So, and that's wildly different as well now. And again, I can only relate to what we do here. Sure. But I know we're not the only ones across the industry, because I've got to be conscious that, yes, I'm the CEO of Exclusive, but also in terms of the BCC and the CSSA, an awful lot of these practices are relatively universal. Right. But in terms of training, we have, it's actually a community portal, and we can talk to our staff at any point in time. We know exactly every week, every Monday, from my group training manager, I get a list of all the training that's been completed coming straight off the portal. Okay. And I can go to any site and say, that person's been trained, that person hasn't. Why? Yeah. And you didn't do things like that, not in those days. No. So it's significantly improved. Yeah, and of course, do you think that's as the profession's got more and more professional as an industry? Like you mentioned earlier, it's a multi-billion-pound industry, which a lot of people don't actually know. So we've got to give that professional look and feel, haven't we? Without question, and I think to some extent, our clients drove it as well. Yeah. Because they began to see that cleaning was a huge cost for them, especially in retail, and so they went and found out about it, and it made sure that within the industry we had to sharpen up. Yeah. And now you're in a position where I think it's an incredibly professional industry. Most definitely. It's still a people industry. Yep. And as we're sitting talking today, there'll be somewhere in our own organisation where somebody's let us down, but it doesn't have to be malicious. It could be transport, illness, all of those things. But we'll know about it. Yeah. And you can react differently. Sometimes I remember an old manager of mine telling me, going back into when I first came into the industry, every day for a supervisor was an adventure. That is. And I'm not sure it necessarily is today. There's still the same issues around resource, but it's a very much more slick operation. Yeah. You mentioned there about the industry still being a people industry. And when you were telling us about your journey into the cleaning industry, there's some names you mentioned that I think of Paul Thrupp, because I say he personally had a big career, influence on my career. What do you think it takes for someone that's, they've got a cleaning company, they're doing okay, they're doing a few £1 million in revenue, they've got to that growth size, and they're starting to, take things more seriously in terms of process. What makes a good
leader of a cleaning company or someone operating at a high level within, in your experience? I mean, Paul Frupp, as my reference, the guy could speak to a cleaner like he's known them for years, and he could also speak to the group CEO of a multinational company, and that always fascinated me. So what does it take to be a good leader of a cleaning company or in the industry?
The first thing, if you took Paul as an example, the first thing I would say is Paul could tell anyone in that company how to do the job he's talking about. That's the important part. So
that comes from that bottom up learning,
have
right?
the experience, have the knowledge, and there's a piece that people often miss out. Be interested.
Yep.
Be absolutely interested. Have some passion and desire about you, because it's amazing. You know, you need ability, you need skill, but sometimes a bit of passion and desire can get you places as well.
Yeah.
And the reality is that ability to recognise, well, there's a phrase that was once used, the day you think you're the most important man in the room is the day you're not. And you see with people like that, the ability to talk to whoever happens to be in the room.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter what that's just a title.
Sure.
And be able to get them to recognise that you know what you're talking about is huge. Being prepared to go and demonstrate, you know, going back to the football coaching, a huge part of that was being able to demonstrate what you were asking people to do. So there's been a time for that. And in terms of moving that forward, trying to understand different people's viewpoints, and it's not always easy.
No, especially in a diverse industry like ours.
Yeah. And the two things that are then on top of that are, don't come into this industry if you don't like people and you don't like people problems.
Yeah.
There's always been the phrase that you're either in this industry forever or for 10 minutes.
Yep.
And I agree with that because I think it is about people. And if you like dealing with people, and if you like seeing people develop, and you like understanding that there's a problem to be solved and it needs to be done, and getting some pleasure out of that amidst a whole raft of frustration and upset and stuff as you go through it, then you'll do fine.
Yeah.
You'll do fine.
You mentioned about the team that you've got here exclusive.
Yeah.
And you mentioned just there about how important it is, especially in a people industry like ours. You know, we're a service industry, you know, our assets are our people at the end of the day at varying different levels. How do you develop a good team? Is there a particular, you know, is there a skill set that you, and maybe there's a crossover between sports here, you know, you mentioned about when you're looking at a tender, you know, the outcome is you want to win. Yeah. Is that a skill that you look at when you're trying to develop your team and you get people around you?
It's a really
ability to win.
It's a really interesting one, Chris, because I think first and foremost, I've got to be honest, I inherited some very good people when I came here.
Okay.
And they're still here.
Good.
So that would say something about the company and hopefully something about the environment in which they work. But we've also brought people into the business who have equally been good people. And I think it's letting them understand that we are an SME. We're a privately owned SME. Therefore, we're accountable.
Yep.
And it starts here. It doesn't start down there. It starts here. Mm-hmm. And it finishes here. So in that regard, letting people understand that, for instance, my senior team, we are accountable. Nobody else.
Yep.
No point moaning about this, that, or the other. We're accountable, and letting them get on with it, and trusting people.
It's a big one, isn't it?
Trusting people, but more importantly, hoping that they trust you.
Yeah.
And that ultimately, what can they? You've got all your expectations that you expect of them, and I've got a raft of expectations that I'll expect of people in the team. But they're entitled to have an expectation from you.
Yeah.
And that is that you're available. That is that you have got half an idea what you're talking about.
Yeah, that helps.
Yeah. Maybe that's where it went wrong. Yeah. And that you can help.
Yeah.
You can help, and that your experience will maybe point them in a direction that sometimes they don't agree with.
Yeah, of course.
But you can say it. So the door is generally open. If somebody's got something to say, come in and say it.
Yeah.
Because that's, you know, there's the old thing about you can take the boy out of Glasgow, you know, and I'm very black and white in that regard, and I've got no problem with it. But you've got to be able to take it the other way.
Yeah, of course.
You know, so we've had some good old feisty discussions in this room.
It's healthy now and then, right?
You don't want yes men.
Of course.
And people will be invested if they think, okay, I've got something to say, and it might always be taken on, or there might be an agreement or a disagreement, but I can say what I want. And I'm okay with that.
Yeah. Quick question, personally for me, it's uber fashionable to be an entrepreneur these days. Was there a particular reason you never thought of branching out on your own, Jim?
I wish I had.
Okay. Is that because you predominantly at the early part of your career, football was the thing, and maybe it was too late down the line?
I remember thinking about it when I was mid-30s.
Right.
And at the time, I had a friend who'd done it and literally bought some vacuum cleaners and started doing some estate agents and building societies at the time. And I remember thinking about it. But at that point in time, I still thought I was going to be the manager of Celtic at one point. And sadly, that never happened. Yeah. So, no, my heart lay in trying to develop that coaching career, which ultimately wasn't the right choice.
So, I say you've worked in some fantastic positions throughout the industry. I always asked our guests that come on, is there a particular high point that you can recall that you really look back on fondly during your career? You know, there's a one particular moment that you always remember quite fondly.
I think...
Was there so many? Because there's
there's not so many, but it's a little bit like the football thing as well. You know, people talk about, do you remember this game or do you remember that game or cup finals and stuff like that? I remember people.
Okay.
People that I've met and
that's an incredible skill as well, to be honest.
Well, if I look at this industry, and I talked about it when they did the installation, Mike Poulter, who gave me a chance, Martin Vesey, David Evans. Now, there was a time at Broadreach when David Evans was the chairman and Jack Broadley was the CEO. And I count myself incredibly fortunate to have met those two men.
Yeah.
Because for some reason, I think they saw me as an adventure.
Okay.
I really do. I think they saw me as some sort of rough diamond. We'll have a go at this.
Yeah. See what we can make out of it.
Yeah. And they couldn't have helped me anymore. They literally couldn't have helped me anymore. And the reality is that in David's case, it's David's family who are the major shareholders here. There's sort of 5 or 6 of his shareholders and family are the major shareholders. And they're exactly the same. They are very much David's children in that regard. So I consider myself fortunate to have been in those two positions and met those people. Arthur Nuttall.
Yes, I remember.
Now, Arthur wasn't black and white. Arthur was black and black.
Yeah.
Occasionally there was a shade of grey in there. But he was tremendous for me. He told me what he wanted, and then he gave you your head to go and do it.
Yeah.
And I remember him saying to me, make your mistakes, but make them early.
Yeah.
And you don't get that.
No.
And I'm not sure you get it now.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess high points for me would be people. Okay. And even now, within both the BCC, within the CSSA, there's some people there who really care.
Yeah.
And I think going back to the thing about having a bit of desire and passion, that's important. I think I can identify that fairly quickly, and I think, you'll do for me.
Okay. So on the flip side, the industry's full of ups and downs.
Yeah.
We've obviously had COVID, which is probably a big one, and people have reached for that because it's still so raw and, close to everyone's heart within the industry. Business is not all highs and awards like you've got on the wall behind you there. Is there a particular low point within your career that you can recall and tell us about?
Yeah, a couple. When I realised very soon in one particular business that myself and the CEO, because I was one of the operations directors, couldn't possibly have been further apart in thinking how things should be done.
Yeah.
At absolutely opposite ends of the scale. And within a year, I had tendered my resignation and said, this isn't going to work out.
Was that a difficult period that year? Was that plain from the outset?
Yeah, within about 3 months, I was thinking, I've made a mistake here. I've made a mistake. And it became more and more prevalent. And you've got family.
Of course.
You've got, my son at the time was probably about 12. And thinking, but I can't. And you get caught in the old cash trap, mortgage to pay. But eventually it got to the stage where I thought, when you wake up in the morning and don't want to go to your work, it's time to change.
Sure. Yeah.
And I did that. That was a low point. So, but it's equally important, again, it's adage after adage here, but you can get knocked down as many times as you want. I mean, being told when you're a young lad that you're not good enough, you still got to go on with it. Do something else. Yeah. And it might be at different levels, but you got to get back up.
That's right, most definitely. So what's in the plans for Exclusive moving forward? What's your plans for growth?
We've done very well over the last couple of 3 years, and we've grown. And we've grown in particular sectors. We've had a couple of punches in the nose as well, as you always get in this industry. But the plan is to continue growing. We, in 2016, acquired Braeborn.
Okay.
And we acquired Braeborn when it was about 6.5 million revenue.
Right.
This year, Braeborn will finish about 18.
Congratulations.
But it's an awful lot of the same people that were there. You know, the team are probably 2/3 of the team are the same people.
Yeah. Usually, because when there's acquisitions, there's usually that consolidation piece, isn't there? Where you're obviously, if you're buying into a business, you've got functions, HR, whatever it may be. So
we did it slightly differently because when Broadreach were acquired, the manner in which the integration was done was, to be honest with you, I thought was horrific.
Yeah.
And it alienated people.
Okay.
So earlier, as I said, Chris, you know, sometimes you learn the things that you'd rather not do.
Yeah.
And that's
sometimes
equally as important.
Down, haven't you? Yeah.
So when we acquired Braeborn, I was determined that first and foremost we were going to keep the two brands, and the shareholders agreed.
Yeah, of course.
You know, and so we did, because it's a good brand. So why do you want to be particularly egocentric about it and say that, oh no, it's got to be this? So we did that, and what we did was then backfill some of our commercial and educational contracts from Exclusive into Braeborn.
Got it.
It meant no difference other than a different letter heading to our current clients. But what it meant was, when we were going to talk to Braeborn's clients, we could show a level of commitment. Because when you say nothing's going to change, that's your first lie.
Yeah.
So in that regard, we were able to show a level of commitment to people. And as a result, it went really, really well. And the results have shown. But again, it's people.
Yeah.
And some of the staff down there would have been desperate to cling on to the fact that, okay, it's these people care and they're not going to change. And lastly, I had made a promise, and so had Gary. The two of us had made a promise to the owner that we would keep things going.
Yeah. And
you keep the promise.
Yeah, of course. And that's the number one thing. And that builds trust within your team, doesn't it? Like you say. So you've got this illustrious career here, where you are now with Exclusive. You do a raft of other stuff outside that. I mentioned in the intro, chairman of the British Cleaning Council, Master Environmental Cleaners. Tell me how during your career, how did your involvement with these organisations come into play?
Okay, so years ago, I was asked to represent Broadreach on the CSSA, and you've got to remember with the CSSA, which is a really good organisation, and one that's going to grow under Paul Ashton's leadership. I would absolutely ask people to commit to that. Okay. Paul's a good guy, and he's going to move things forward. Absolutely, no doubt about that.
I'd love to have him on the podcast, just to put it out there.
Chase him. Keep chasing him. But the reality is, the company is a representative, and it's not the individual as such. And John Finlater, who's the CEO and has been with the company, the CSSA, for years, also does an absolutely sterling job, and has done all his time. And I began to see that there was opportunities here, but I enjoyed the fact that you were at least trying. Now, there's always been criticisms of organisations such as the CSSA that it was just an old boys club.
Yeah.
Well, at the time, I wasn't an old boy. Maybe now, but not at the time. And the reality was, I didn't see that. And it's always easier to change things from the inside.
Definitely.
And I saw people who genuinely wanted to make a difference.
Okay.
And that was fine. And then Doug Cook, who was the previous chairman, Doug asked me if I would be the CSSA's rep on the BCC. And I did. And I was there for a couple of years when I was asked if I would become deputy chairman and then subsequently chairman. So I found myself in a situation where, okay, I've said yeah. If you're going to say yeah, have a go.
Do it well.
Have a go. And the reality was, Paul had been the previous chairman of the BCC just as COVID hit. And I thought Paul handled that incredibly well. And he put a lot of things in place that I've been doing subsequently over the last 18 months or so, 2 years, that he started, that I then was able to take on, and hopefully my replacement in Delia Cannings, who takes over in about a month, will be able to carry on as well. And that's what this is all about. This is legacy stuff. This isn't about you.
Yeah.
You know, it's just not. And so that I was then involved, as I say, as chairman of the BCC, when lobbying and trying to change the recognition of the industry and the apprenticeship levy and all of these things were absolutely paramount, especially having been in the midst and coming out of COVID, when, let's face it, and listen, if there's one message to get across, we cannot allow anyone to forget the work that cleaning and hygiene operatives did through the pandemic.
Yeah, it was massive.
And although there's been little sound bites from people, and maybe you could argue this is one, but although there's been little sound bites from people, they went into buildings every day that other people just weren't prepared to go into. And it's all in the rear view mirror now, isn't it? It can't. It just can't. So at the same time, I've been in the Worshipful company for 20 odd years.
That seems to be, I don't know if it's me, that seems to be gaining, the Worshipful company seems to be gaining some real traction.
And
recently.
so it should. Yeah. Do
you think is there a reason for that, Jim?
Yeah, I think there is. Again, some really good people there who care. And
Gary Fage, people.
Yeah,
like,
Gary, I could, like Darren Marston, there's a whole list of names. And for years, the Worshipful company was trying to gain the Chartered Practitioners Register, which is by, as you know, by royal assent.
Yep.
And we got it a couple of years ago.
Okay.
And I did it recently. And listen, you spend time talking about yourself, and it's well, MD can do that.
Yeah, of course, definitely. I'm the best at it.
Yeah, but it is something. And if you take the CSSA with Clean Start, if you take what people are doing with their own training programs, if you take what the Worshipful company are doing with the Chartered Practitioners Register, and then hopefully the apprenticeship levy, which maybe we'll come on to.
We will do.
The reality is there is no reason why you can't have a cradle-to-grave development program for someone coming in as an operative and ending up with a chartered practitioner. There's no reason other than, do you want to do it?
Okay.
And have you got that vehicle to do so?
Yeah.
So I'd been asked to go into progression, as they call it, go into the court as an assistant. And it was purely coincidental that the two things came together at the same time. Which has been a bit difficult in terms of time and management and everything else.
So many plates.
Yeah. I'm very good to my wife. I don't go home much. And in that regard, it's also been an honour. You know, and I've got to be honest with you, I'll pass over to Delia Cannings, who will do an incredible job.
Yeah.
Because if passion and desire are a qualification, she's heading that up.
Okay.
And but I'll miss it. I know I will. Yeah. Because it's been a really interesting journey.
Yeah.
I'd like to have been more successful, but hopefully that we've left it that we can still continue to move on. So even this morning, obviously you know about the LBC thing.
Yep.
But we've also been talking about attending the Labour Party conference, because I think everybody would agree that there's a fair chance that there'll be a change in government.
I would be inclined to agree.
So we've been trying to deal with the Conservative Party. In truth, we've also spoken to SNP, we've spoken to Labour, Lib Dem, Green Party, and got very little back.
Right.
So easy to point fingers.
Yep.
I think it's just the political world in which we live.
Yep.
And so we're trying to have a place at the Labour Party conference so that if there is going to be a change, we can talk to the people that matter. We're dealing with the UK HSA, the health security, the Home Office, and yet we've not made the inroads that I would have hoped.
Okay.
So an awful long way to go.
It sounds like you took over these varying roles just before COVID. Is that right?
No, just after COVID. Just after COVID.
So tough time. To be alive in the cleaning industry, right? Yeah. How much of a landscape shift do you think COVID was for the cleaning industry?
I think it should have been a bigger one. I really do. And it's not for the want of trying.
Yeah.
And I guess you have to have a balance in your view. My view, because I'm as biased as they come when it comes to this industry, is that the government should have absolutely put their arms around us and said, what do we need to do?
Yeah.
Reality, it's not going to happen. And in fairness, they had their own issues going on, both internally and economically. I'm told that I'm the first chairman of the British Cleaning Council that served under 3 prime ministers.
Okay.
That was only in a month.
Yeah.
You know, so
it shows the state of UK politics at the moment.
Well, yeah. But so and in truth, if you go back, I wouldn't have had the Prime Minister's job at that time for a pension.
Yeah.
Nobody was expecting what happened.
Of course.
But we can learn from it.
Yeah.
And that's the piece I think that it upsets me because I think, was it earlier this week, the ex-Prime Minister David Cameron was saying that he acknowledged that it was wrong to close down Operation Sickness, which was the preparedness piece. And I'm sure we will make changes, but we've not done anything yet.
Yeah.
And so if you're not going to listen, God rest him, my father was a head teacher. He had a saying that said, 1 acceptable, 2 is questionable, 3 is gross stupidity.
Yeah.
Well, let's not head towards gross stupidity. I think that's really important. So you can moan all day. We put together the BCC along with SC Johnson, along with the Royal Society for Public Health. We put together a paper which is going to be part, I'm told, of the COVID-19 inquiry.
Okay.
We've been working or trying to work also with other APPGs, the all-parliamentary groups, so business resilience being one, on having a resilient hygiene programme and a preparedness programme. So there's 11 recommendations to say this will happen again.
Yeah, at some point it's going to, isn't it?
It will happen again. Therefore, we need to be prepared. And what does it look like? And the cleaning industry, cleaning and hygiene industry, has to have an absolute place at the table because we have a direct effect on people.
Yeah. Working, keeping their offices clean, schools and public transport, various other infrastructure.
You asked my question, did I think it was a sea change in lots of people's eyes for seeing what cleaning and hygiene really was about. I think, without being conceited about it, I think the government also missed a trick because they were trying to get people to go back to work. And we were the arbiters. We were the people who could have been shown that they're giving people a hygienic confidence.
Sure. Yeah. UK government could have gone, well, we're interacting with the cleaning and hygiene industry. We've got some training guidelines. They're all adhering to this, via the help that you guys are providing. It's a safe environment because we've had these discussions. And like you say, it would have got people back in the office a lot quicker. Instead,
we had profiteering.
Yeah.
We had pop-up companies. We had
COVID fogging and
all of these things. And the reality is, okay, it happened.
A quick story there. I remember you say about profiteering. I remember we work with some construction companies, and I remember one company. I said, "Look, what are you going back?" And they was like, "Oh, don't worry, we've got the mastic company, so that do around the windows. They're doing some fogging." And I was just like, at real head in hands moment. I was just like, okay,
I remember, we invested in a solutions director here who looks after all the innovation stuff and sustainability, and at the time we were talking about fogging machines. And I think ultimately I bought, it was either 1 or 2 when people were buying them by the barrel load.
Yeah, of course.
And the thing for me, and I know people disagreed, and maybe I was lucky, but I think ultimately it was proven correct, that people didn't have the money.
Yeah.
And they didn't have the money to do these things. And if they waited 72 hours, it was pretty much clear anyway. So I could see some people doing it, but I couldn't see it being as huge as everybody else anticipated. And so I think maybe it was 2.
Yeah.
When people were buying 10 and 15 and 20. And listen, maybe they worked for them.
Sure.
Maybe they would turn around and say to me, you don't know what you're talking about. But for us, it did not make sense.
Yeah.
And actually, as we came out of COVID, we'd grown 20%.
Yeah.
But in contracts, not on specials
sure,
stuff like that. So... but I think also we missed an opportunity in terms of, however tragic COVID was, and it was horrific, and we all know I'd lost somebody and so on and so forth. It also put a spotlight on cleaning and hygiene.
Yes.
And maybe in hindsight we could have taken an even bigger gamble.
Yeah. I think for me, I mean, I'm not as attuned to the industry with, the BCC and things like that. Maybe one day down the line, I'd love to be involved in that because I believe I'm passionate about the industry, and that's why I'm with you today. That's why I've been with because I want people to understand what we do as an industry and some of the fantastic people within it. So that's why we do what we do. From an outsider, I didn't feel like the drum was being banged enough. And I put this to you before we started. Do you think we missed the boat with that? Do you think we were too late? And maybe that's because we were all, what do we do? Like, we haven't been here before. So it was uncharted territory. But like you said to earlier, it's in the rearview mirror now. And trying to do that, when it's been and gone is an increasingly difficult task as we're finding out. So do you think we missed the boat with COVID?
I think there's a good opportunity that that's the case. I say it's in the rearview mirror. It's partially in there because it's still around.
Yeah, of course.
And variants and so on and so forth. I think so, but I think there's a couple of things. I think there is a piece around the rabbit in headlights. I think there's a piece around that. I think it's also true that we are such a diverse industry. It's 59 billion.
Yep.
It's a hugely diverse industry, whether it's pest control, whether it's waste, all the things that we've talked about.
That cleaning and hygiene umbrella encapsulates so much, doesn't it?
And so to make that splash, everything needed to be together.
Yeah.
And everybody's got different agendas.
Okay.
And you have to understand that, because if your agenda is your agenda, then it's right for you.
Yeah.
But somewhere along the line, you also have to have the bigger picture, which is this whole agenda and this whole industry. It's what I work in.
Yeah,
I work in that part of it, but there's a bigger piece around that. And lastly, and I remember exchanging some stuff on LinkedIn.
Yeah, of course.
That the bigger piece was, I completely get people saying, what are we going to do about this? What are we going to do about that? Shouldn't we be doing this? Shouldn't we? Yeah, but get involved as well.
Yes.
Get involved and actually say, right, okay, I don't like this. I don't agree with this. I'm going to have a go.
Yeah.
And we've seen that recently. So we've had Billy down in Hereford contacting his MP, Angela Gill contacting her MP. I was in touch with, because his office is just around the corner, Grant Schapp.
Knocking on the door.
Yeah. and actually just saying, excuse me.
Yeah.
You need to listen.
Yeah.
And when I see examples like that David Garcia has also been doing stuff. When I see stuff like that, you think, right, okay, a few more.
Yeah.
A few more. You've got the We Clean, We Care campaign. You've got the QR code. You've got the letter template. Send it.
Yeah.
Especially now as we lead towards an election. There's never been a better time to ask politicians to listen to you.
Yeah.
Especially if you've got a business within their constituency. Because ultimately, a politician is going to be interested in votes.
Yeah.
There's some very good vocational MPs out there. I wouldn't want to just throw everybody under the same bus. But it's about votes. And in that regard, contact them.
Yeah. We met with our local MP, and a bit like yourself, like this morning when I heard you on the radio, you tell them what the industry's worth in terms to the UK economy, and they literally have no idea. Yeah. I mean, the lady we met, our local MP, Tracy Crouch in Kent.
Oh, yeah.
She was flabbergasted by how much the industry was worth to the UK economy. But like you say, it's the problem with dealing with MPs is there's a lot of sound bites. We met and we followed up a few times about some of the issues we'd raised, recruitment, which we'll come on to, and other bits and pieces, recognition, key worker status. And we never heard nothing back. So how do people, you mentioned about Clean, We Care. How do people get involved in that? What is that? Tell us a little bit more about that that people can get involved.
If you go into the BCC website, you'll see the We Clean, We Care campaign. Yep. There's a QR code that downloads a letter template, which you can then send to your MP and ask to meet.
Okay.
And people have been doing it. And the results have, not many, but they've been encouraging.
Yeah.
But we've had about 400 or 500 people who have actually taken the trouble to do it. And I thank each and every one of them for it. I'd like to see a lot more.
Sure.
Do it, because then you can create a bit of a wave.
Yeah.
And as you've seen, when people do it to their local MPs, especially if their company is a significant local employer, then you will get a bit of traction.
Yeah.
If we can do that enough times, if the APPG can get alongside some of the other APPGs, like, as I say, business resilience and COVID preparedness, then we can build a bit of a storm in that regard.
Yeah.
And the most important thing is, honestly, it's like pushing water up a hill.
Yeah.
But you got to keep going.
Of course.
You just got to keep going.
It goes back to that earlier point you raised about, you come across these stumbling blocks, but about not giving up, especially if you're passionate about what you're doing.
Get back up.
Yeah.
And there'll be people that will come alongside you because you keep getting back up.
Of course.
But we, as an industry, the bit I sometimes don't, I say is sometimes people, our whole industry's about getting back up.
Yeah.
That is what, when you think about all the, and you must have dealt with it, all the nonsense you've had to deal with at 4, 5 or 9, 10 o'clock at night, and you get back up.
Yeah.
And this is about making it better. Because it's not about individuals.
Yeah.
It's about making it a legacy piece that the business can move forward. And that, the people that I've got out there have got a chance to go and do what they want to do.
Yeah.
And so on and so forth. And I don't know, I've got 2 grandkids. Who knows what they'll want to do? But you need to keep going.
Yeah.
And the only thing I can guarantee you is you'll get more people say no than say yes.
Yeah. You mentioned about the industry there, about how more people need to, lots of people talk the talk, not so many people walk the walk within our industry. And I feel like we're a little bit of a closed shop in terms of an industry. Why do you think that is? Why do you think it can be so fragmented as an industry? Do you think it's because it's so large?
I think it's because it's so large. I think there's so many different facets.
Okay.
And I don't know if it's something that's passed from generation to generation. This might be rubbish, to be fair, but when I joined the industry, we were very much an invisible army.
Yeah.
And I remember getting incredibly frustrated by my own teams who would walk past customers and put their head down.
Mm.
And I don't know if that's something that's inherent within us, that we're to be seen and not heard, or whatever it is. And I think that has been dramatically changing. But you talked earlier about not banging the drum loud enough, and I think there's a huge piece around that. But I think we should be doing it all with our staff as well.
Yeah.
We talked about Paul, for instance, being able to talk to any level. That should be the way throughout the whole industry.
Yeah.
That way and that way. Makes no difference. We're people doing a job. And in that regard, if you're going to judge yourself by what it says in your business card, stop wasting time. So I think in that regard, there's a piece around the industry always having been this invisible army. And for years, we've talked about trying to change that and becoming more full-time. And there's certain aspects where that's happened and it will continue to grow. And the more the merrier, because then we have to get into sort of day-to-day operational, everyday relationships, conversations, be seen as more professional, because we are. But the biggest thing for me in the whole £59 billion thing is, how dare you not talk to us at £59 billion?
I totally agree.
We deserve to be spoken to.
Yeah.
And we should just simply be, and it's easier to say than do, not be accepting it.
Yeah.
I think somebody said to me, we employ more people than the NHS. That's a huge statement.
Yeah.
Now, part-time and
of course,
I get all that. But it's a huge statement. So how dare you ignore us?
Yeah. And again, I think that maybe goes back to the lack of, how I felt, a lack of us banging the drum, because people don't know this. As I say, and I go back to the interview you was on the radio this morning. It's just timely that I heard you come on. You've got Nick Ferrari, great guy. I enjoy listening to him. But he was absolutely flabbergasted with the amount, how much it's worth, how many people we employ, how many vacancies we've got, which we're going to come on to shortly. And people don't understand that. And I think that's a lack of us getting out there, because like you say, maybe we've been seen as that industry that comes in the morning, in the evening, whatever it may be, and then disappears. So we definitely need to be doing more of that for sure. I'm just not, in my own mind, it's like, how do you get more people on board, like to do that?
By listening to these sort of things, by listening to radio, by
listening to our podcast,
following the campaign, and becoming a part of it, as opposed to just saying, "Well, what are they doing now?" Or it's somebody else's issue.
Why are you not doing that, Jim, or whatever it may be?
Make it your issue.
Yeah,
it's your career.
Of course.
Make it your issue, and who knows? Who knows? Listen, who knows where it can take you?
Yeah, of course.
And we have to. You're absolutely right. Talking on the LBC programme this morning, an incredibly experienced journalist in Nick Ferrari had no idea at 59 billion, at 1.5. You could hear his, what?
Yeah.
And I bet you though that would be magnified millions of times throughout the UK.
Yeah.
And so it's our job.
Yeah.
And that's what it is. It's your duty. It's your job to tell people.
Yeah, it's great. It was great. Actually, it made me smile. Definitely. I was cheering you on through in the car. I'm sure Adam could attest to that. You mentioned on that interview about recruitment.
Yeah.
Nightmare at the moment. I know we're an SME. We're not a massive contractor. Hopefully one day. Recruitment is a nightmare at all levels. You alluded to it on the discussion you had this morning.
Sure.
I've got contracts, especially if they're a little bit more secluded, where you're paying £15-16 an hour and I still can't get people through the door. What are we, the British Cleaning Council, what do we need to do about that? You mentioned about the apprenticeship levy and things like that. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, you need to look first at the reasons. And had we more time this morning on the LBC thing, I would have gone to it. We lost a huge amount of people post-COVID.
Yep.
Migrant workers, non-UK nationals who had gone back home. They hadn't seen their family in 2 years. They hadn't been allowed to travel.
Yep.
So the first opportunity, back to see family.
Yep.
You get that. Good luck to them.
Mm-hmm.
Under the old European rules, there was no border travel, so they could come back. That stopped. So we lost those people and couldn't replace a whole raft of them. At the same time, the new immigration laws came in, 21, in which we are regarded, or we weren't listed because we're seen as being low skilled. I keep saying the same thing. I don't remember too many politicians saying that through the pandemic, but there you go.
Cleaning up after their parties.
Yeah. Don't
Sorry.
Move on. So in that regard, we couldn't replace those people. So it is frankly a ridiculous, risible, uneducated narrative when people say low skilled. And it tells you that there's a huge cultural gap, a social acceptance gap, where people think a cleaner is just this invisible person.
Yeah.
You hope that a couple of sort of phrases, you hope that people want to get into this industry by choice and not by chance.
Yep.
So therefore we've got to make that a journey, an open door. And on top of that, to do that, you need to look at what skills are required. And they're out there and they're plentiful, and your guys and girls do them every day. So to say it's low skilled, complete and utter drivel. That's the first thing. The second thing is the apprenticeship levy was previously submitted by the industry, but through the CSSA, and it was rejected on the grounds of low skilled. Now just think about that. You've got a government policy that said, we want apprentices. We want to give you apprentices. We'd like to do that, please. Yep. And we're paying you money for the privilege of doing so. But you're saying that we're too low skilled. Does that mean too low skilled to ever learn?
Yeah.
Because that just doesn't stack up. Enid Blyton couldn't write that.
Yeah.
So in that regard, we went back to them. And I have to say the Institute of Apprentices come back and initially said, no, we told you before. Oh, did you? Well, think again, because we're not accepting that. And actually, they come back really quickly, and the people that we spoke to were excellent.
Okay.
So, good. But we've noticed that every time we've got close to it, so it should have been December, then it should have been January, then it should have been May, and then it should have been July. And almost as you get close to it, there's an obstacle. And you can decide why you think that might be. But this time we said no. No.
Still firm.
We're going for, because we're paying the government somewhere in the region of 20 million. It could be more than that. And we can only use about 20% of that money because we don't have an apprenticeship levy accreditation for commercial cleaning.
Yep.
It's there for healthcare, but not for commercial cleaning. And we put a trailblazer group together, and we've done it again. And Lauren Kyle and Karen Slade, who have been pretty much heading the trailblazer, have done an incredible job. Really hard-working, incredible job that they should be lauded for. And it should go in July. It needs to get in July. And hopefully we'll get it. And that will open doors for people to use the money that, if you're over £3 million, you've got to pay it direct from your wage, your wage bill, to open to give that money for training and development purposes. It will also, Chris, remove the stigma of low skill because you have official government accreditation. At that point, we hope to get that the skills visa onto the statute so that we can actually push that forward, and then doors will be hopefully begin to open. Until all those things happen, we're in a cycle of events where, and you must have this, you don't have enough staff. We've got roughly 200,000 vacancies.
Feels like 150,000. I mean, with my company most days.
But what people are doing at the moment, we've always had a situation where people would maybe 1 or 2 jobs.
Yep.
But now they've got 3 or 4. And if you're the company that's got a clean and hygiene operative for job A, that's great. If it's job D, you're getting somebody who's burnt out, tired, and isn't going to do the job properly through no fault of their own, because they're tired. And we've been saying that to government as well. Look, you're killing people.
Yeah.
At a time when you're talking about welfare and mental health and well-being, we're adding to it.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, we've had the issue with Brexit in terms of getting supplies, supply chain, chemicals, machinery parts into the country.
Yeah.
So the whole thing, it closes in that regard. And so people say, yeah, but the customer is driving costs down. Remember? You must have
of course,
customers driving. And there's a truth in that.
Yeah.
But if you're the customer, your costs are going up.
Yeah.
You can't get the parts and supplies. Service, by definition, always the first thing that people look at because it's not a product.
Yep.
And so the world goes round. And we've got to try and get a break in that chain.
Okay.
And I think the whole thing about being able to get resource into the country, this morning I said, the government helped poultry, it helped truck driving, and it helped fruit picking.
Yeah.
And so it should.
Yep.
It's not a criticism of those 3 industries. But why not cleaning and hygiene, where we have a direct effect on the health and well-being of people in the UK?
It's such a fantastic point. It just makes perfect sense. I couldn't see how anyone could argue against that, to be honest.
They can't. They just ignore it. And therefore you keep knocking on the door.
Yeah.
So all of those things, resource has to change.
Yeah.
And you now see, and it showed again recently, where the government were talking about certain areas, hospitality, construction, where they might look at temporary stays. Why not cleaning and hygiene?
It's so frustrating, isn't it?
When
you talk about it, it must drive you mad. It must drive you absolutely crazy. Jim, if I gave you a magic wand and you could tell me what the cleaning landscape looks like in 5 years' time, what would that look like?
It's an interesting one. I think I would hope it would look, because we've also got a huge part to play ourselves. We've got to look at a strategy for the business. It's short term and long term. Yeah. And the long term piece is to make this an industry where people want to come and join it. Yeah. The people don't at the moment, because there's a cultural piece around the UK that people think it's this Mr. and Mrs. Mop thing. So if it was 5 years down the line, first and foremost, we'd have a seat at the table with government and be talking about how we make this resilient UK hygiene a cultural piece, a social accepted piece, which by definition will add value to our people because they will see themselves as being the truly valued individuals that they are. On top of that, you would have the apprenticeship levy in place, people getting developed, but we'd also have a strategy as a business and as an industry to actually be saying, right, here's all the developments, whether it's cobotics, robotics, whatever, drones, whatever it may be. Here's all the science and the technology behind it. Here's all the use of IT to actually show the transparency of the business.
Yeah, data-driven cleaning, isn't it?
Yeah, sustainability and, not greenwashing. This is what it actually looks like. Here's the results to show it. And you're actually then saying to the young people to come into the business, we don't have to come in to do that job or this job, because there's this.
I've mentioned it on the channel before. There's such a diverse range of roles, isn't there?
And you'd be talking about an industry that could actually be talking to people in universities and colleges. And I'll go back to what I said a wee while ago. You could have somebody coming in as a clean and hygiene operative and finishing up as getting the CPR through the Worshipful Company of Environmental Cleaners. And that would be a great story. Yeah. So that's the landscape I would hope we're going to go to.
Yep.
I think it's going to go like that.
Of course. We want a little bit of a roller coaster, don't we, in a way?
But I'll go back to where do we end up?
Yeah.
But to do that, we need people involved.
Yeah. What's next for Jim Melvin, personally?
My wife's not listening. No, carry on.
Yeah.
Trying to continue to build exclusive, cracking group of people, deserve every success they get. Mm-hmm. As I say, I give up doing the British Cleaning Council in about a month, but I'll be there to help if required.
Yeah.
We Delia and the team who have been absolutely excellent and great support to me. In my year as master, I've got a couple of projects that I'd like to see.
Okay.
One of them, and I'm hopefully meeting some people in the next few weeks, is, got to be careful I say it because it sounds as if it's a bit holier than thou. If we could get 1 or 2 people off the street, okay?
Yeah.
I was in the city yesterday, and it breaks your heart. So if we could get 1 or 2 people who wanted to come off, that's the first thing.
Sure.
And get them into a role in our industry.
Yeah.
Help them to find a place to live and so on and so forth, whilst maintaining their dignity.
Yeah.
No advertising, no big splurge, none of that nonsense. This is about an individual's dignity. But ultimately end up with them, for instance, going through apprenticeship levy, CPR, Chartered Practitioners Register. Because the Worshipful Company is a registered charity. I think that would be a fantastic thing to do.
That's a fantastic idea.
And it won't be 20, 30, 40 people.
Yeah.
And it probably won't be finished in my year.
Yeah.
But I keep coming back to it. It's not about you.
No, sure.
It's the legacy piece.
Yeah.
And if we could do something like that, and hopefully the next master, Lorraine Larman, would be able to take it on. I'd like to see if we could achieve that.
Yeah. That would be a fantastic story, wouldn't it? I mean, even thinking back to, don't get me wrong, imagine someone in that scenario and what they can achieve out of the industry if they put their mind to it. I mean, I look at myself. I took a part-time job as a cleaning supervisor at HM Treasury, and here I am 25 years later. That's a fantastic initiative. I'd love to see that come to fruition.
You said what's next for me. The reality is that over 30 years ago now, as a young guy trying to make his way in sport who wasn't good enough, that's the first thing. I got an opportunity in this industry. Yeah. And this industry's been good to me and my family. And it is a good industry.
Definitely.
And what people forget is that until ultimately our robots take over, the one thing that will always be required is people. Yeah. And there's an opportunity for people there. If you want it, go and have a go. And you'll get it. You'll get an opportunity. And therefore it'd be nice through, in this case, the Worshipful Company, and or anything else, because I've heard some great stories from other people that what some of the things that they do. I guess you put a wee bit back. That's probably where it is. Yeah.
Fantastic finishing point, really. Last point for me. If you could give one piece of advice to anyone that's coming into the industry, whether that be they're starting their own business or they want to get into the industry or they're new to the industry, what would that be?
Care.
Spot on.
Care.
Yeah.
Care about the people around about you. Care about what you say you're going to deliver. And be prepared to deliver it, even although sometimes you won't do as well as you think you're going to do. And don't try and be somebody else. Just, be who you are. You've learned from all sorts of different people, plus and minus. Just be yourself. Yeah. And if you've got enough about you and go back to the passion and desire and you've got the interest around about you, you know what? You'll do okay.
Yeah. Fantastic point. Jim, I don't have anything else today. Again, thank you for the work that you do.
Pleasure.
In trying to push the industry forward. And most importantly, your time today, time's the most valuable asset we have. And for you to spend an hour with me, I greatly appreciate that. And if I can ever repay that debt in any shape or form, you need to only ask. Jim, tell anyone where, if they wanted to find you or exclusive, where they can do that. Okay, you can contact me at jim.melvin@exclusivecontracts.co.uk,
or on the website, which is www.exclusivecontracts.co.uk.
Perfect. Jim's also obviously on social media, on LinkedIn specifically, so if you want to get in touch, then please do so. That wraps up another fantastic interview, one of my favourite ones today for sure. As always, make sure you hit that like and subscribe button for us. Head on to your favourite podcast platforms and search the Cleaning Up Business podcast, and make sure you leave us a review there. Jim, thank you again.
Pleasure.
Thank you to the viewers, and we'll catch you on the next episode.
Thanks very much.